All right, we are broadcasting. We'll just give a second for folks to come into the webcast. Okay, so hi everyone. Welcome to this Strong Towns webcast called Incremental Development, your community's tool for local prosperity. I'm Rachel Quedno. I'm the program director at Strong Towns, and our presentation today is going to be kicked off and kind of hosted by Gracen Johnson. She is the Director of Content and Contribution at the Incremental Development Alliance, and she's a good friend and previous contributor to Strong Towns. And she's going to be sharing the stage today with a host of fantastic people who she will introduce in the course of this conversation. Before I hand it over to Gracen, I'll just note that you can feel free to submit questions in the Q&A box at any time throughout the presentation, and then we'll get to those as much as we can at the end of this webcast, just about at the top of the hour. So Gracen, I will hand it over to you. Thank you so much for leading us today in this presentation.
Thank you, Rachel, for that introduction. Can everybody hear me okay? Am I getting a thumbs up? Okay, good. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us here to talk about incremental development. This is what we like to call real estate for regular people. And by we, I mean the Incremental Development Alliance. We're a nonprofit, an educational nonprofit, and we cultivate 1,000 small developers in the cities that they love. So again, my name is Gracen Johnson, and I'm beaming in from Toronto, Ontario today. And back in 2015, I helped launch this organization with our co-founders, Monte Anderson, John Anderson, Jim Kuman, and David Kim. And I've served as Rachel said, as our director of content, which basically means that I do educational design. I work with our faculty who are experienced small developers, and I help try and translate their knowledge that they've got through, that they've learned the hard way, and try and translate that into something that's simple, it's memorable, and it's something that's accessible to you, even if you haven't touched math since high school. So that's me, and this talk is all about incremental development and why it's beneficial to you, to your city, how it's a great opportunity, and how the way you do it really matters. And then we're going to dive into some stories from our faculty and from our alumni about how they got started, because you can really do this too. So first, why we're all here. So hit us up in the chat box, everybody. Tell us how you're feeling on a scale of 1 to 10. Are you feeling great about the development that's happening in your neighborhood? Do you like the things that are happening or the things that are not happening? Tell us where you're from, and on a scale of 1 to 10, we'd love to see it. Oh, we've got some relatively high numbers, but a lot of pretty low numbers on there. And that's standard. That's absolutely standard. Oh, this is awesome. I'm seeing another Canadian. Love it. Keep it coming, guys. So in our world, the development industry has evolved in a way that it's specialized and it's consolidated. And it means that we get a lot of this sort of thing. We get single family subdivisions, and then we get large scale development, big apartment buildings. That's what the development industry is kind of designed for now. And it's not that people are trying to do things that make you unhappy. It's that this is how the process has evolved. And it's become extractive by design. It's sucking the wealth out of local communities, and we don't like that. That's why you're probably not feeling great. It's also only really accessible to big developers. Local people can't necessarily find the money to build like a 300-unit apartment building, or to buy a huge farmland and turn it into a subdivision. We know through Strong Towns and through the work of Joe Minicozy that this costs more in infrastructure, it costs more to maintain than it provides back in tax revenue. It's also very car dependent, which is expensive for us personally. It's also expensive for the environment. It's mass produced, which means it's going all up at one time, but that also means that it's going to be declining at a similar time as well. And that makes this really fragile environment. And you're familiar with all of this language at Strong Towns. It's just not ideal. We end up with craters in our cities. We end up with acres of parking. We end up with craters in our economy when things don't go well because of the way that we've specialized and consolidated our development industry. And you'll be familiar with a graph like this or a chart like this. So this is from Joe Minicozy at Urban 3. I hope that, Rachel, maybe you can put the link to some of his earlier webinars in the chat box. But what Joe has done and what he's worked with Strong Towns to do is to to really show how much this extractive development is actually putting us in the red. It's a huge infrastructure liability. It's costing us more than it brings in. So the red in that chart is development that is a net negative. And yet the green is net positive. That's development that's actually producing more wealth. It's producing more tax revenue than it's costing in maintenance. And there's a lot of red. There's a lot of red in cities all across the continent. And this is a huge and a widespread predicament because we have, as municipalities, limited taxing abilities. We're not able to, we can only really tax property and sales. There's also limited debt you can take on as a city, and you can't grow forever. You have a limited land. And so the question becomes, how do we get to green? How do we stop bankrupting ourselves? How do we get to green within the land and the resources and the people that we already have? And that's really a question of building more, building things that give more than they take. This is one of our principles at incremental development, build things that give more than they take. And at Strong Towns, we talk about that a lot in terms of the financial resilience of our development. But it's also a soulful and a spiritual thing. You want to build things that give more than they take, because then your neighbors are actually going to like development. We want you to get from like a 2 or a 3 on, you know, I'm saying Lake Dallas, Texas at 4. We want to get you up to a 9. We want you to be so excited, or a 10, about new development that's happening in your neighborhood that you want to see more of it. And maybe you even want to be a developer. And the thing is, no one is going to come and do this for us. There's no one that you can call that is going to come and build this kind of thing for your neighborhood. You have to do it yourself. Locals have to do this, but that's actually a huge opportunity. It's an opportunity for you individually and for your city. Now in Joe's graphs, often you're going to see that those spiky green parts are high rise, it's downtown development, but it doesn't always have to be high density, or you know, it can be high density in a small package. And we see this all through our old neighborhoods, through our core neighborhoods, that green does not need to be high rise. This is a 6-unit building. One of my best friends lived here. It was completely dignified. This is a wonderful building that can fit into a downtown neighborhood. And there are countless examples of these really high-performing buildings that are small, they're cute, they're lovable, they're in existing neighborhoods. This is a time-tested approach that we all actually know really well. And in fact, I would argue that you can do this intuitively. Most people can. You're going to take to this like a duck to water, because people are actually really good at building small things. We like cozy places. Everybody loves a nook. Everybody loves things that are small. And when we're able to be creative and useful with our small spaces, our cities become these wonderful, beautiful, and homey places. So what is incremental development? The short answer to that is it's 0 to 3-story infill. It's constantly evolving and adapting over time. And we say 0 to 3 stories because you don't even have to start with a building. You could start with a tent. It could be a farmer's market tent. It could be a trailer. It does not actually even have to be a full building to start. The point is that you're using what you already have, and you're learning and you're adapting over time. And so how do we get to green? Well, here's what we've seen working on the ground. You build on what you already have. You focus on filling in the gaps of your core neighborhoods. You reuse existing buildings whenever possible. You enlist your neighbors to help you. And doing so is going to build confidence in your neighborhood, and you're going to be able to repeat that over and over again, and you're going to get better over time. And it really brings out the best. This is one of Bernice's projects in Buffalo. You're bringing out the best in old buildings and bringing out the best in yourselves when you do this. You're applying creativity, and you're applying that human touch. And this is phenomenal in good times. This is a new build infill by some of our alumni in Portland, Maine, the Lockmans. So it's great in infill. We can create these wonderful opportunities that reflect our neighborhoods when the times are good. But incremental development is possibly most important when times are not good. So this is just a cafe around the corner from me. When COVID hit, they had to remove all of their seating inside, of course. And what they did is they turned this into a grocery store at the front of their cafe because they were allowed to still be open and do takeout. Now, Starbucks can't do this. Dunkin' Donuts can't do this. They were able to turn their place around and create this beautiful, essential neighborhood destination practically overnight. And that's why we say that incremental development, in the words of Gertrude Stein, is really what puts the there there. It's what creates the soul of your place. And so it is more than that financial contribution. It's also the reason you even like being there. And that's really important. You know, this is important to me personally. This is 3 generations of my family doing what they love to do, which is play music and sing together. Incremental development helps families stay together, or, you know, whatever, if that's your born family or your chosen family, because it's creating opportunities to stay where you are. You don't necessarily have to move away. Or if you do move away, you have a reason to come back. And it allows people that are at different stages of their life, like my dad's still working, but he's close to retirement. We're, early careers, my brothers. And then there's, some grandbabies in the family too. Everybody's at a different stage in their life, and they're definitely at different income levels. And so providing spaces of all different sizes within the neighborhood lets those families stay together, because it's really hard for me to see my family. And I imagine that there's a lot of you that are in the same boat, where you would love to be able to stay closer to home, but it's not necessarily possible. And we think that it is actually possible, and that you can help do this. So the how and the why actually matters a lot, though, because doing something incrementally alone is not going to save you from an extractive model of development. You could incrementally have real estate vultures come in and pick apart your neighborhood and try and flip it and sell it for pieces. You can incrementally have all kinds of things happen. And that's not necessarily good. What we're talking about is making the right steps and making sure that the people who are doing them are your locals. So it's about the steps you make and who makes them. Now, steps for us are the process. It's that one step at a time process of city building that we talk about. But it's also an acronym. We call these step buildings. They're small scale, time enhanced, entrepreneurial, and purposeful. Small scale meaning they're 0 to 3 stories. It's small enough that a normal person can take on a project like this. And it also means that they can stay more affordable, because when you keep a building small, you're not going to trigger really expensive things like sprinklers and elevators all the time. So the less expensive your building is to build, and small scale is less expensive, the less money you have to charge in rent. And that's a really important thing. They're time enhanced. They get better with age, like wine. These are things that can learn over time. They can become more productive. They're actually going to increase their cash flow. They're not going to rely on passive appreciation. They're working as buildings. They're entrepreneurial. They earn their keep, and entrepreneurial people tend to build these buildings. And that's really important, because as we see with our cities, you need things that can pay for their own maintenance. We need working buildings. And they're also purposeful. Purposeful means that they're answering a question. What does this neighborhood need? And they're built by people that actually care about the neighborhood. And that makes a huge difference, because without that purpose, it's just a profitable building. But when you do have purpose, it turns into something much greater. And I see my screen is frozen, so I'm gonna momentarily stop share. And I'm going to reshare. Thank you for your patience, everyone. Great. Okay, so step buildings are about learning and earning one step at a time. You can start with a tent and you can evolve. As you learn, you're actually able to recreate your city in all of these little steps. And each of these is providing you an opportunity to not only earn wealth, build generational wealth, but you're earning the trust of your neighborhood. You're earning the ability to do things that are bigger and better. So who makes the best steps? Local people. Local people make the best steps because they care. They have skin in the game. They're more likely to build a lovable building because their name is attached to it and they have to walk by it all the time. And they don't want people, ashamed of what they built. They're more likely to hire local people. They're going to hire your local accountants and architects. They don't have some headquarters out in who knows where, dealing with just, a massive firm somewhere. They're going to hire local people. That keeps money circulating. And they also see and feel and respond to feedback. So here's some more COVID examples that I've seen walking around Toronto. Restaurants that are not too ashamed to put out a hot dog stand. They may be a long established restaurant like the local here in the bottom right, and they put out a hot dog stand and they sell drinks on the street because that's how they can stay afloat. Again, the keg is not doing this. I don't know if you have the keg in the US, but the keg is not doing this. This is the local that's doing this. You have fruit and veggie stalls. You have people that are able to provide open air grocery options, really essential things for their neighborhood, and they're able to flip it around quickly. And also you have landlords that actually care about their tenants and tenants that actually are thankful for that. It just creates a much healthier environment in your city. And what it really comes down to is, do you care about what happens to your place in the long run? We sure do at Incremental Development Alliance. And so what we do is we train locals to rebuild the essentials of a strong neighborhood. But unfortunately, there's not actually enough small developers to fill the demand for this. And that's where you come in. And there's a really low barrier to entry here. So we're going to talk about how you can do this too. So the first thing you're already doing, if you are here through Strong Towns, you are learning about the essentials of a strong neighborhood. That is the first step and the base of everything you do going forward. So congratulations, that step is already on its way. Next, you need to learn how a building makes money. And we can help you with this. So we do small development 101 workshops. We'll help you learn the basics. If you have a project that you're working on, we can coach you through it with a small developer bootcamp. We have other niche courses. You can check out what we do at incrementaldevelopment.org. So we can help you figure out how a building makes money. Next, you have to find your farm and you have to observe and be a good neighbor. Now, this is another one of our principles at IncDev. You commit yourself to a place you love that needs you. So often that's your hometown. Sometimes it's not your hometown. Sometimes you don't have a great relationship with where you grew up. But the thing that matters is that you really care about a place, you commit to it, and you're willing to understand and observe what it needs. You know, the phrase that Strong Towns uses so often is to humbly observe where people are struggling and see how you can contribute. And we call that farming. This is a word that comes from Monte, who's on this call, and he's going to do our closing remarks. And it's farming because you're cultivating and you're trying to bring out the best out of the land beneath you. Then you're going to use your skills and your hustle to make a project cash flow. And it's important to note, again, this does not even need to be a building at this point. You just take the next small step wherever you're at. It could be a lemonade stand. It could be, you know, anything that you're doing to learn how to create something that, again, gives more than it takes. It cash flows. It is going to earn its keep. If you can do that, and you can do it again and again, you can repeat it, you're going to be building trust. You're going to build your own skills. You're going to create a reputation for yourself in the neighborhood that's going to change your luck, in Monte's words. You're going to build a team of people that can help you do this bigger and better each time. And you're also going to build generational wealth that's going to make you, that's going to provide opportunities to do different projects. And that's really important because the project is actually the neighborhood. It's not just the little piece of the neighborhood. When you focus on building a better neighborhood, one project at a time, then each of them is going to be feeding back into the others. Every single thing you do is going to improve everything you did before it. When you start thinking about things like a farmer would, right? You're thinking about the whole ecosystem that you're building in your neighborhood. And finally, you help your neighbors do the same. This is super important. It's a team sport. You cannot do this on your own. And your neighborhood is going to benefit so much when you're hiring local people, you're helping other entrepreneurs own their building. You're really lifting up your neighbors. When you do this, you're going to create a place, again, that has soul, it has staying power. It's, you're able to cultivate a place that can endure through tough years. And you become a neighborhood farmer. And the whole secret sauce to this, the secret sauce to getting to, you know, this top of the pyramid is that you care. It's about you and whatever skills that you bring to this, because you can do stuff that, you know, no one else can do. You are special. I don't mean to sound like a kindergarten teacher, but you are special, and you caring is what makes this work. So how does this happen? Well, we need to grow more small developers, and they can be either full-time or side hustle. We need investors that are in our communities to actually put their money and their land to work. And in order for those two groups to do their job well, we need small development champions who are willing to advocate and push for changes in policy and in zoning. So we'll start with the champions. If you're a small scale development champion, first absorb all the strong towns, do all the strong town stuff, take their training, follow their advice, they've got it right. And what you'll probably find in that process is you can create so much opportunity for small developers in addition by subtraction. You may be able to create opportunities simply by removing barriers. That's what we see all the time. And if you feel motivated to do this, but you don't really know how, or you're feeling stuck, you can come talk to us. We do offer public sector support. We can come understand what's going on in your city, what it is that you want to see happen next. We can do a development simulation, which will show what is legally viable to build or legally possible to build according to your zoning. And then also what's financially viable within that. And that's usually a big aha moment for people. They realize, oh my goodness, this is why we're not getting what I want to see. And on the flip side, this is why we're getting a lot of things that we don't like. And then we can also do implementation support with you. We can coach you through the process of actually making those changes and connect you with people that are able to consult with you along the way. So that's for public sector. And for our developers and our investors, do you have any of the following? Do you have a property of any size or kind? Do you have a business that needs a home? Do you have money or access to money? Do you know rich people? Are you a rich person? Do you have skills related to development? Are you an architect? Are you in the trades? Are you a realtor? Do you have a hustle and local relationships? And most importantly, do you have a why? Do you have a reason to do this? Do you care about the place you live in the long run? And if that applies to you, then you can do some training with us. You can go to this link right here. We'll actually create a whole Strong Towns cohort for you if you'd like. So sign up, RSVP, we'll do some training with you. There's also a webinar there, a very inexpensive webinar that will get you started on some of the code barriers that we see all the time. So check us out there. And we're going to now talk about some of these, this in action, because people have started from all different kinds of entry points. We have a number of wonderful people here that are going to share their stories. And these steps are actually real. I know that these are my little drawings, but we see this sort of thing every day. So we're going to start with Brian in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I'm just going to play like a couple seconds of this video because Brian has started with this beautiful bespoke tailoring business. And I love that he's got this mobile element to it. It's so amazing. And so he started with this experience and this really like amazing skill in tailoring, and that has translated into small development. So Brian, I'm gonna let you take on your section.
Awesome. How's it going, everyone? Thank you so much, Gracen, for doing this. Can everyone hear me okay? And Grace, I'm just gonna go through it, and if I need some tech help, I'll say, hey, I need some help, or just maybe next slide, because I'm not really sure if I'm supposed to be pushing the slides or whatever.
Yeah, you just let me know when you need the next slide.
Okay, great. All right, so sounds good. So my name is Brian Burnett, Raleigh, North Carolina. Fast forward from college, I got out and was in tech for a little bit, so I learned a lot about buyer psychographics and purchasing behavior and purchasing patterns. So I took that knowledge and kind of fell into tailoring, because when I was in college, I actually worked at Nordstrom, and in Nordstrom you had to be 100% commission, and so I cultivated a lot of good relationships from clients, and they were like, would ask me about certain things or how to wear certain things, and I was like, wow, I have a decent trust base. So while I was working in tech, that was a passion of mine. But I kind of fell into tailoring and launched a tailoring house in 2015. And so as you with the math, this will be coming up on year 5. And so we have a full bespoke tailoring house. We do tailoring and alterations. However, my first love was real estate. And I grew up in public housing. And, my parents never really owned anything. The first house that we purchased was, had mold under it. So mold was seeping up through the floors. And then unfortunately, my dad ended up losing the house. You go to the next slide. And so that piqued my interest regarding real estate. And while I was at Nordstrom, I remember a buddy of mine, his father was a really big developer. He actually kind of like partnered with a couple people that ran SaaS. And I just noticed the amount of wealth. The amount of wealth that they created. So and honestly, these people were like super like brilliant. Like these were just good old boys, but I'm here in the South, and that just really appealed to me. So after having our tailor shop in year 1, 2, 3, and 4, and last year I told my wife, I said I really want to get into commercial real estate. I said I really want to be a developer. It's a calling of mine. I want to build. I want to see. I want to help other people get into it. And she was like, well, what do you want to do, Brian? I was like, let me write it down. So I wrote it down, and I sent out some letters of intent, and actually stumbled upon someone who wanted to sell their building. And I asked them for seller financing. And my wife was like, no one's going to do that in this market. And this guy did. And so what you're looking at on the right-hand side is my poor drawing of the building that we actually acquired, and it's actually near Tarboro, North Carolina. It's in the downtown area, and the 2 bottom areas are the existing 2 levels. I would like to go vertical, but right now we have 7,000 square feet, And if you look to the left where you see you see the skeleton of the building, that's what I'm envisioning. I'm an extremely visual person, and I need to see what it looks like, because I actually have to attempt to get the historic preservation community to actually approve going up an additional 8 stories. But what I foresee for that building is residential on the bottom, commercial, retail on the bottom, some offices towards the center of the building, and maybe a loft or 2 on the top floors. If for some reason we can't, pull the people together, which I know that won't be a problem being a part of incremental development, then we can definitely do a lot of things with the 7,000 square feet that we have. But this is, as you can kind of see, like to the right is kind of like what I have, and to the left is what I envision as far as going vertical. Next slide. And so,
Brian, I'm frozen. I'm going to just share a different screen.
Okay, cool beans. And so, in addition to what we're doing now with the tailoring house, I'm also trying to take on we're taking on another project that is actually the city of Raleigh is actually offering an acre, about it's 1.7, is zoned R10. And that lot is they kind of announced it on Twitter. So you're seeing it right there. So to the left, that is the lot that the city has put on the market for $1. Yes, for $1. They announced it via Twitter. And so I built the tailoring house selfishly because I really wanted to get close to a lot of mentors and people that were in the industries. Because when I worked at Nordstrom, I was around a lot of really successful people, but these people all seem to really gravitate towards finance, real estate. And I mean, it's I always say that the universe, God, the universe I know God, and the universe wants me to be a part of this because of the people that I continuously meet. And so I just happen to have a commercial real estate attorney as one of our top clients at the tailoring house. And so when the city of Raleigh released this on Twitter, 3 people sent it to me, first off. And then I reached right out to my client, and she works for a very, very well-respected commercial law firm in Raleigh, and they do a lot of the site planning work. They'll do the site fitting work, all of that stuff. And she invited me to sit at her home 13 feet away last Friday, and we talked about it. And she taught me about the zoning, what the zoning was, what the R10 meant, what building a team would look like. And so a buddy of mine, one of the guys who actually, he's a client, he's just a really good friend. I call him like a people champion, Clark. He's also a member of the We Do Incremental Development, Clark Reinhardt. So I think he and I are going to try to team up and create a team, see if we can make this happen and pitch this to the city. And if you see to the right of the screen, the gray and the white structures, that's what I was riding around one day and I saw these and I was like, this would be a great product for some affordable housing and to build on the sites that you see to the left. And because Raleigh has a huge problem with a lack of affordable housing. And this is infill development. This is, I noticed, towards the upper end of kind of like a project that's massive. However, I do feel like we have the right people around you and the right tribe around you. I feel like, anytime you have something like that, you can have a good chance of success. Next slide.
And I think.
Is it?
I think that's it, Brian.
All right, cool. that was plenty. So, but yeah, so that's where we are. So again, if I can do it, anyone can do it. I have a couple pieces. I have a piece of land. I have a building already. And again, with the most recent slide, you can see that we're trying to do something that's a new construction. And so we'll see how it goes. But I mean, I have attorneys around me. We've been interviewed structural engineers last week, and so we'll get some. I'm confident that we'll have some stuff done. And this is to piggyback on my previous real estate experience when I did rehabs and did some property management, which I learned and really got my teeth kicked in. But if I didn't get my teeth kicked in 2007, then I wouldn't really have the courage to kind of push forward now. So that's all I got. Thank you all so much. I can't wait to hear about everyone else's projects and hear everyone else's story. Thanks, Gracen.
Thank you, thank you. And I love just hearing how you can use whatever you have around you, whatever the people that you're learning with in your existing business to create opportunity with what to do next. And I also love the great attitude about going through something rough and learning from it. So next we have Sarah. Sarah's in Windsor. She's actually going through our boot camp in Windsor right now. And Sarah is just a mover and shaker in Windsor, Ontario. She has such a huge impact on the relationships in her community. And I'll let her talk a little bit about the project that she's working on and how she got started.
Thanks, Gracen. Hi, everyone. I'm from Windsor, Ontario, Canada. I'm on the other side of Detroit for most of you Americans. We like to call ourselves South Detroit, but they don't refer to us that way at all. But so I've been, I guess, doing community development for the last 5 or 6 years. So I don't come from the urban planning, real estate, architect world at all. I come much more from the political science, the community kind of advocacy work. And I've been doing that work for a few years. And so this is kind of a picture of that. So if you want to go to the next slide. This was some of the work that I'd been doing before I decided to take on my own project. I was helping with our local farmers market, leading Jane's walks, doing community gardens, crime prevention walks, all these types of things, neighborhood cleanups. And what happened was, what started to happen in my mind was, there's only so many alley cleanups you can do in your city before you start asking yourself, why is your neighborhood so dirty? And what happened was, with a lot of residents, we started getting together and talking about more systemic issues like vacant buildings. We did a lot of advocacy around vacant building registry in our city. And we started doing some of these more systemic pieces because we realized that our core neighborhoods were struggling, and it wasn't just going to take monthly cleanups. And so if you want to go to the next slide. One of the things that we started doing was a program called the Little Things Matter program. And in Canada, we have these things called community improvement programs, which our planning department does. And one of the things we advocated for within this, within our community improvement plan, was to have residential micro grants added, so that the average resident in our neighborhood could also have access to money that was mainly to spur development and to get more developers, building condo buildings or, adding residential above commercial, but there wasn't anything for the average person. So we advocated for that. And then what happened was, it didn't actually make it in the city CIP for a few different reasons, but we decided that we were going to do the project on our own because we just felt that people really needed it in the neighborhood. And so we did it for 2 years. We're not doing it this year, unfortunately, but we did, last year we did about 15 projects, and I can't take any credit for it. It was a great team of people who were doing it, but those are a couple of the examples. The one on the house on the right is actually now fully painted. And so it's just this idea that, when you fix up the exterior and you're able to do a matching grant with residents, there's buy-in from them. And then we also had a team of volunteers and people who were able to kind of add to the quality of the entire, I guess, neighborhood. So I'm just gonna scroll down. Okay, so if you want to go to the next slide. So all of this work started getting me thinking about my own project and what I wanted to do, and mostly because in November of 2018, I got a call from a random person who didn't know me very well, but said, "Hey, I heard that you're doing all this stuff and you really care about houses and vacant buildings in your neighborhood. You might want to go to a workshop in Highland Park, Michigan. And maybe that'll kind of add to, I heard they're doing cool things in Michigan." So I kind of was like, okay. So I went to it, and that kind of spurred on just this idea that, wait, I can do this too. I can actually have a stake in my neighborhood. So I bought this house last summer, and I started to think about what I could do with it. It's a 1,300 square foot bungalow. So if you want to go to the next slide. And I decided that I am going to create an attached dwelling unit. So in the States, they're more commonly known as ADUs. Here, they're like secondary suites, or in Toronto, they're laneway cottages because they're fancier than us. But so this is going to be at the back of my property. It's the yellow building. And what I think maybe why I'm being included in this is because, the whole slogan, real estate for regular people. It has taken me almost a year to get to a building permit with this with this project. By the time I factored in the city changing their bylaws and maybe needing variances and having to do design revisions, I'm looking at getting my building permit this week and then hopefully starting construction the next week. Or I should say by the end of the month. So the idea here is that it's going to be a 400 square foot little just rental for me to have on the back of my property. So if you want to go to the next slide, I think it's the last one. What I'm hoping to continue to do is actually do more of these projects throughout all of our core neighborhoods. So the building that's in that picture there was actually my former office for our neighborhood group. We lost some funding in the last year, so we don't have it anymore. But the property owner heard about what we were doing and said, hey, can you help me maybe like repurpose this building? I'm thinking about adding residential. And so right now it's 2 commercial units on the ground floor, and he's looking at adding 6 residential units and doing an upfill to make it 3 stories. And so I'm kind of helping him get to building permit on that so we can have more in our neighborhood as well. So I don't want to take up too much more time, but those are kind of some of the stories from Windsor, Ontario.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, next we have Kyle in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And we've been actually working in Kalamazoo with the city of Kalamazoo for a number of years now because they have a really wonderful planning department that's trying to revamp their zoning and make small scale development possible. And in that process of working with Kalamazoo, we came across Kyle, who's this young guy who decided that he wanted to stay in Kalamazoo after college. And he wanted to live and work in the same spot. So I'll just let Kyle talk about what his projects look like.
Yeah, thanks, Gracen, and Rachel, thanks for hosting us, and Brian and Sarah, thanks for sharing your stories. I think those are great. It's always nice to not feel alone, right? So it's good to have us all together talking about these things. I think a little bit about me. So I grew up in Michigan, Kalamazoo, went to school in Kalamazoo. It's a small town of about 75,000 people, and it's really like the quintessential Midwestern town. It used to be a big manufacturing center at the turn of the century. Checker cab used to be made here, Gibson guitars used to be made here, and then a lot of paper mills. And of course, as all those jobs went elsewhere, the town started to change, right? A lot of vacant buildings, a lot of old buildings, a lot of cool buildings, but it started to change. And the university was still here, which was nice, which was what brought me in. And it's always a question when you start to think about graduating college, you know, do you move, do you stay? It's usually, where is the job? And I was fortunate enough to have a job and stay in town. My background's in tech and startup businesses. And as I started to hang around, I started to wonder, you know, why is Kalamazoo the way it is? Why did all my friends leave? Why was I fortunate enough to stay? And ultimately, it started leading to this idea of, you know, why aren't there more murals? Why aren't there small places that I can live with cool little eclectic backyards? Why are there just these big apartment buildings here? What's going on with this? And I started to do a little bit of research, and I ultimately kind of, through my work on the side, or my primary line of work at the time, I met a couple of folks in real estate, and I started to learn kind of a little bit more about development. And I started to kind of build almost my guiding principle to this. Grace, if you want to hit the next slide, of be the change you want to see. I think really for this strip, in this background here, this is like the only strip in Kalamazoo that's walkable with shops downtown. That little image that Gracen showed of all those warm spaces that maybe are giving more than they're taking. This is it. There's a 4-lane highway that goes through town. That's kind of Main Street. And then there's this little offshoot that's more of the walking mall. And then you get into the big high rises and single family houses. And I was like, how can this start happening elsewhere? And at the same time too, I'd started to accumulate a little bit of personal wealth, and I was like, I'm going to buy a house. But it didn't feel right to just buy one in the suburbs. I wanted to help start being that change that I could see. And I also wanted to start thinking, okay, if I'm going to buy a house or start thinking about getting some land in town and being the change I want to see, how can I do that beyond just my house? So it's this idea of finding your farm, or starting to figure out, where could I go where I could also grow and help beyond just the one building. And that led to finding a spot in a little neighborhood just 4 blocks directly north of downtown. Grace, if you want to hit the next slide. I think the term is fixer-upper. I looked at this, it was in foreclosure, and a bank was willing to sell it for a small amount of money. And it was a matter of figuring out, hey, could you do something with this? Could you turn this into actually something that a person would want to live in? And if you hit the next slide, Gracen, it turned into, I think it turned into something really nice. I was able to essentially keep a building that was falling in on itself. I don't know if on the last slide you noticed there was some mold. The roof was caving in. So water was getting into the building. How do we get a roof on this thing quickly? How do we clean it out? I did all of that work about 4 years ago, and then it took about 2 years through IncDev's work with the city and through my ability to just save enough money and then ultimately get financing, find a bank partner after talking to every bank in town, who is going to want to go on this journey with me. And then finally getting the financing to put this together. I ultimately made this a duplex. So this is a 2-story building. It's brick, it's 25 feet wide, 60 feet long. So 3,000 square feet total, 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom duplex. I live upstairs. This is the downstairs unit. I rent out the downstairs, and I've just been able to live here for the last 2 years, happily renting out the downstairs. And now I'm starting to work on the building next door, which is a lot of fun too. I think it's just interesting to think about the journey. I never thought I'd be here with Strong Towns talking about this. I never thought I would be this person, I think commonly I'm referred to as the test dummy in Kalamazoo, because I'm like the first person that's charging ahead, trying to figure out, hey, how can we do small development in our town? It's tough. And I think another image that I wanted to go back to that Gracen was talking about was that you need to have the 3 elements, not specific. Oh yeah, that's slide 2. There's the before and after. I think that there's a lot of parties that are involved to help make this happen. There's you and your energy and your hustle. There's the folks in the city, and they have to be on board with recognizing that the needs of a small developer and the way a small developer can operate are different than a large developer. And then also finding the funding. Same way with the city, the banks are also used to working only with large developers that can put a huge amount of money down and have a huge amount of money in escrow or in their personal checking account to back up the project. They're not used to thinking through, wait, this old building that was zoned commercial that used to be an old coffee shop can be a duplex? What do you mean by that? So there's a lot of teaching and learning that goes along with it. And I'm happy that this first one turned out, and I'm excited to keep turning old abandoned buildings into something like this.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kyle. We're going to talk
Gracen.
about Joel's work next. And before we move on to that, I just wanted to comment that Kyle and Sarah are both actually setting precedents in their neighborhood. Sarah is on the first wave of people that's building secondary units in Windsor. And so her project and those of the people in the boot camp are actually setting the comparables. They're setting the standard for what this actually looks like. And so these seem like really, really small projects maybe, but they are absolutely changing the neighborhood, and they're changing what people even see as possible and what is financially possible in reality in the neighborhoods in which they work. So I just wanted to point out that they are spearheading change, and that's never easy, but they are actually making it easier for everybody else that follows in their wake. So next oh yes, Joel, you're here on video. I'm so glad it worked. Okay, we got 2 thumbs up from Joel. Joel is in Atlanta. He's one of our alumni that went through a pretty intensive boot camp program in Memphis as well, actually. And he's got just an amazing backstory. You know, he worked as a tech consultant for a while doing solutions consulting. And then he's co-founded, like he's just a serial entrepreneur. He's co-founded a number of tech startups that are focused on small business finance and like really empowering people in small business and particularly women. So yes, go Joel. And that has translated into this community development real estate. And so Joel can talk about his story in Atlanta.
Yes, thank you, Gracen, and absolutely a pleasure to follow so many wonderful speakers that have already enriched my day. So thank you, Brian and Kyle and Sarah for all your contributions. And so for me, you know, I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia. As Gracen mentioned, my background was not in real estate. It was actually in technology, startup technology, and otherwise. But it's definitely been an exciting journey to get to this point, and so the opportunity to share a couple pieces of that is always enriching. So with that being said, and you can go to the next slide, Gracen. My story is really just about a boy in a city, and I'm the boy, if you hadn't figured that out, and Atlanta is the city. And even though we're talking about small development and many people are, you know, have already spoken about maybe cities that may seem smaller, and Atlanta may be considered big time. But for me, I was raised here. I grew up in the oldest public housing project in the U.S. For Black people. And Atlanta, you know, in the 80s was a very different place. And even though it might have been considered a big city, it always kind of felt like a small town. And even today, it still feels very approachable and small. But my love for Atlanta is really the beginning of my why and my story, because while I was doing a lot in technology and startup and, accessing capital for those who didn't previously have it, I was seeing my city unfold in a way that unfortunately I didn't think was going to contribute to it remaining the type of city that I grew up in and that I loved. And at the end of the day, what Kyle mentioned really became, one of my initial points, which was, if I'm going to lose my city and I don't see anybody else doing anything about it, then maybe I am the one that I'm looking for. I need to be the change. And so that's why, for me, Atlanta was the beginning of this why. So we can go to the next slide. And even though Gracen already mentioned this slide, this was really, for me, one of the key components that led me to the boot camp that Gracen mentioned in Memphis, Tennessee. So I'm based in Atlanta, but while I had this heart and this desire to do something about how Atlanta development was unfolding, I literally had no background. Like, I didn't go to public or urban planning school. I didn't go to architectural school. I hadn't even come from a family that had built houses or had been exposed to real estate whatsoever. I didn't even know real estate agents. And so when I was thinking about how to actually start taking this passion and this purpose and actually providing or creating something, I knew I needed to get connected and quickly. And I happened to be introduced to this topic, which was this group that was cultivating 1,000 small developers in the cities they love. And I had a city that I loved, and I knew I was a small developer. I wasn't even a developer, but I knew I was small. And so I thought, hey, this might be a group that can actually help me unfold, what was just a little bit of a vision in my head. So I really appreciate everybody in Incremental Development Alliance for that, and continue to work alongside them in any ways that I can. So the continuation of that story is that I did do the boot camp and left Memphis, energized, excited, with a new set of energy, but also activity behind that energy. And so with the next slide, we can go into the other things that for me became guiding principles. So what I love to do is take something and create nothing. Take what other people would toss away as, trash, and recreate that, reimagine that, re-envision that, revitalize that. And so real estate, and specifically property, whether it be a single family home or a building, commercial building, small or large, is to me representative of that at a small scale. And at a larger scale, because I grew up in a neighborhood that was extremely neglected from an economic and social perspective, then how you can take those little principles of taking an old beat up house, a neglected property, and reimagining it, then I also could see that a neighborhood and a community could likewise be revitalized and reimagined. And so that's really what I love to do at heart. So with that, there's a couple examples there of some projects that we did, very similar to like first project that we did. We actually started out in a neighborhood called Eastlake here in Atlanta, and this was prior to the recession. That neighborhood actually had a public housing project called Eastlake Meadows that recently had a PBS documentary done by the daughter of Ken Burns, who did, things like the Civil War documentary and jazz. But it's a phenomenal documentary, but it was done on Eastlake Meadows, which in Atlanta was called Little Vietnam. And so one of our first examples of really taking something from nothing was working in this neighborhood and seeing it, kind of transition and unfold. So with that, as we go to the next slide, these are some more examples just of interiors. And so a lot of people, I actually show this in neighborhoods that look terrible, like the most neglected neighborhoods in Atlanta. And people think, oh my goodness, Joe, this must have been like in multi-million-dollar houses and all of this stuff. And I tell them, no, actually we did this in the heart of, essentially the hood. What you do inside of a property and what you do with the property has nothing to do with the cost in terms of that. It's just the imagination and your ability to grind it out, and also be, for lack of a better word, just using ingenuity. And so a lot of this work is done in very affordable houses and a very affordable price point just because we have a certain method and a certain way and what we're trying to contribute, which is to take things up a level. And when you're trying to, transition something, you have to make a splash. And so this is the ways that we make a splash. But as we go to the next slide, at the end of the day, though, it's still all about community. Our actual tagline is real estate as a community development tool. So what I'm really in is in community development. Real estate just happens to be the tool. And so one of the ways in which I do that from a small developer perspective is that I moved into the neighborhoods that I was going to be working in. Little did I know that this was called, having your farm and building out your farm. I just thought, hey, if I'm going to start building somewhere, maybe I should live there. And so the neighborhood that I moved in particular is called Historic Adair Park, one of the oldest neighborhoods in Atlanta. And so this happens to be one of the festivals they put on called Porches and Pies. But this is what has been really fulfilling to me, is that as we unfold these projects, this isn't something that I talk about happening miles and miles away. This is something that is happening right around me. And so I'm very thankful to be a part of that. Also, this image is representative of another key piece, which for me was about how do we create and operate in real estate in a fashion that's a lot more inclusive, that involves those who already existed in those communities, that includes those that are coming into those communities, and that it enlarges the scope of what it means to actually have a community that is not just, the same, everybody looks the same, everybody comes from the same background, but an actual diverse community across every fashion of diversity you can imagine. And so that's what we're working on. With that, the next slide really goes into some of the other things that are focused as a small developer, which is that you have to be, somebody who's willing to, in the tech world, we call it hacking. You hack out a solution, you come up with an idea. In Atlanta, one of the issues that we struggle with is zoning. We have terrible zoning. It reinforces all of the opposite of what people say they want, whether it be affordability, community, all of these things. Like, we build the exact opposite, and our zoning actually encourages that. And so one of the ways in which we're trying to overcome things like single family zoning that's pervasive is to, rather than just fight against the system, which we are doing to get things changed, but while those changes happening, to just hack the system. So this happened to be a single family home that we were able to create using the basement, additional 2 units. It remains in a single family zoning, but this is essentially 3 units. The bottom 2 units have kind of what's considered a wet bar area where they can have, hot plate and kitchen and things like that, and a living space. And then the upstairs is more of a traditional 3-bedroom, 2-bath living room space. And so once again, while we're still trying to create the opportunity to have zoning for triplexes and duplexes, this is how we're hacking the system in a way that was affordable, created an affordable 3 units, and also that the city could see if you actually enabled more of this, it would happen, and that would solve a lot of issues. And so as I end and kind of pass the baton over, the last slide, or last 2 slides, are really just about never forget that one is a very big thing. One house is representative of one domino, and that's the principle that I hold in life, which is that I don't have to take down the whole problem or have the whole solution. If I just have one part of the solution and knock down one domino, the beauty of the domino system is that it'll knock down the next one, and that'll knock down the next one, and then you have a complete picture. And so with that being said, the final slide, and I'll get out of here, is just that you want to make sure you're paying attention to your community, to your organization, to what you're doing, and try to do it in a way that fundamentally is impactful. You want to think different, whatever the boxes are that were there before when you got into that house or into that community, you're not limited to that in any way. And then, as Monte likes to say, be legendary. And with that, I appreciate the time, Gracen, and the opportunity to share a little bit of my story.
Thank you so much, Joel. Yes, be legendary is the perfect way to transition into, from Joel's story and into Bernice's and Monte's as well. This is something that our faculty really embody, and it's such a joy that, we often experience people like Joel who went through our program and they're just amazing at this, and they become faculty. And so they're actually able to not only pay it forward through their neighborhood, through, you know, that one domino of a building changing the neighborhood, but they're actually paying it forward with their skills as well. So we're really, really glad to see that happen. And we have Bernice talking next, and Bernice is definitely a legend as well. She is a tiny titan, as she calls herself. And I'm just gonna pass it over to her because she'll do a much better job of describing this. Bernice in Buffalo, take the floor.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay, great. All right, my name is Bernice Radle. I'm here in Buffalo, New York, and it's July, and no, it is not snowing. In case anyone is wondering, it is not snowing in July. I get that question all the time. So basically, in a nutshell, you know, I'm a historic preservationist. I actually came from the energy efficiency world. I've been in real estate since 2007. Actually started in real estate like few months before the crash. So that's gave me a big kick in the teeth, as Brian liked to say. And I'm the vice chair of the zoning board here in Buffalo, New York, and have an urban planning degree. So I sort of wear my urban planning hat all the time. I love Jane Jacobs and I love walkable cities. And for me, Gracen, if you could hit the next slide, please. I am basically kind of like what Joel said. I'm just a little lady with $1 and a dream. I'm a millennial with student loan debt. I don't have any money. I have more now, but when I started Buffalo in 2012, which is a small scale incremental based real estate development company, I started it because as a preservationist, I was watching 8,800 buildings being torn down in my city. And all I could do is say, what the heck? Like, why are these buildings being torn down? Not understanding the background of the finances and why they were stuck in a vacancy vortex. So for me, I just started Buffalo because I wanted to save a building. And my big why is because I grew up in foster care. I spent a couple of years in foster care. I grew up in extreme poverty. I know what it's like to live in just really poor substandard housing and to go hungry for a very long time. And so for me, I'm seeing these buildings getting torn down. I know that Buffalo has an affordable housing problem, and there's so many people that need a really good quality place to live, and realize that, like, I don't know, maybe I can do something about it because no one else was doing anything about it. So I became, I don't know, in 2012, I started Buffalo. Didn't have any money. I randomly ran into somebody with money who was an angel investor. And he gave me my first ability to buy something, and we started from there. And I swear to you, if you're out there saying, like, well, how, I don't have any money or I don't know what to do, if you have a vision and a statement, my vision and statement was I'm going to save vacant buildings, and we're going to do it in a way that preserves the historic character, that keeps things a little more affordable, that you know, that makes it more beautiful in our neighborhood for the people in the neighborhood, that celebrates diversity and celebrates inclusiveness. And so if you have that mission and you have that passion and you have a little bit of background, you know, real estate of something, you may be able to find your angel investor. I swear, I cannot describe to you being 25 years old starting my own real estate development company. It's kind of dumb, but it works. And I'm proud that we did it. So anyway, next slide. So I'm just a girl with a dream, $1 and a dream. The next slide is kind of what I wanted to show what I love to do. So I actually live right down the street from here, from this building, which I named the Huntress. Yes, my attorney said, why would you waste an amazing name like the Huntress on a little tiny baby building? But I said, well, she's fierce. And so I can't stress this enough. These little baby buildings, like Gracen said, they're workers. They're beautiful. They provide your small businesses a place to land that's not as expensive, and is like a safe space for them to start doing like the dreamiest things and trying their entrepreneurialness and like building a business. And like, they're just great little worker buildings. And so many big developers can't tackle these. And so many single family homeowners or neighborhood people, like neighborhood activists, they can't tackle these either because they don't really know how, which is why I love IncDev, which is why I'm a faculty member of the Incremental Development Alliance, and why I love to teach this stuff, because it's just it's possible. And these little buildings are where dreams come true. And so next slide. So this little baby building, the Huntress, turned into what I basically 3 businesses and a home for a single mother who also has a photography business and has a beautiful place to call home, a woman who is a nail salon tech and wanted to grow from her basement to an actual space, and Stefan, which is on your left, who had an idea that popcorn is love and he wanted to start a popcorn company in the middle of a tertiary city, in the middle of Buffalo, New York, where 30% of our population is low income. He said, I think I have a vision that popcorn will make it. And he is crushing it right now, especially during COVID, because he's been able to pivot. So this little building, the Huntress, this little ferocious warrior building, turned into a safe space for a family and for 3 businesses. And so for me, it's just a dream come true, and I have the ability to do it because Buffalo is 3 businesses. We're a property management company, we're a construction company, and we're a development company. We can do all of this stuff in-house. I have 15 people on staff, a big team. We just make it happen. We're able to renovate as affordably as we can. We're able to be and do it quickly, and we're able to manage it so that it's managed well and taken care of and loved for years to come. So our business model supports the incremental development model, which is very hard to do. A lot of people do it side hustle. I have been doing it full time for a little bit over 4 years now. So next slide. So my advice to you is to buy an existing building. Everyone says build new buildings, yada, yada, yada. No, that's not what I would advise. I would buy an existing building if you can in your neighborhood. If you see the picture of me smiling like crazy on the left-hand side, that building I'm literally sitting in right now. It's my home. And the building to the right of it, I bought it. It's my rental. There's a little cottage in the back. I bought these buildings. The lights were on. The sewer was working. I mean, the sewer was backing up and there was sewage in the basement, but it was still working, kind of. The utilities were on. The furnaces were in. The people were there. And so we were able to sort of renovate it right and have a little bit of income in the short term while we were doing these substantial renovations. So I say buy an existing building because they're still on and they're still working, and you can wrap your heart and your mind and your arms around them and really care, so next slide. And then my 2 favorite slides that I put in every presentation I ever get, because Gracen made these for me, which just cracks me up, is that I have to show you guys why you should come to Buffalo. I'm just kidding. Maybe come to invest in communities that really desperately need investment. I wanted to show you that I have a slide that has made me an official, that's given me a PhD in cute building rehab, which is this slide. These are all the buildings that I've purchased for less than my student loan debt. Just take that in for a second. So a $1 cottage or a $7,000 house or whatever. And so as we're going through the world and we're raising children and we're encouraging people to go to college, and that's fine too, don't forget about how you can invest in your communities in a way that celebrates the community and brings these buildings back to life. And yes, it's about spreadsheets, but if you commit to your neighborhood, you commit to your community, you live there, you breathe it, you can really make a lot of change in your neighborhood and make it be the neighborhood that you want to see. So on that note, I have one piece of advice to give you, other than the thousands things I've just said. My favorite quote is, do what you can with what you have where you are, by Teddy Roosevelt. Do what you can with what you have where you are. If you can't buy a building today, or you could get the training. If you can't buy a building and you want to do something, plant flowers in the ground. Things it's just, you can do little baby things to get you on your way and to build and bring your neighborhood up. And so with that said, I love you all. Thank you, Gracen. And you guys were all amazing before me, and Monte will be awesome. So.
Thank you so much, Bernice. Yeah, I know. Every person that's speaking, I love all of you. I love our alumni. I love our faculty. I love everyone watching. This is great. Okay, we're going to close this out with Monte. Monte has been a mentor to all of us. He's senior faculty. He's one of the co-founders of this organization. I actually met Monte through Strong Towns at the Strong Towns National Gathering years ago, and he was giving a presentation about his work, 30 years of incremental development in Duncanville, Texas, and his farms around there. And Monte's just inspired all of us. He offers amazing coaching, and hopefully he'll be able to stick around for some question and answer after this. Oh, I should have had him up there. So Monte, did you want to close us out with some remarks? Hopefully, I know that his internet is actually.
Yeah, sure. I'm good. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Gracen, and everybody for being here today. So I wanted to say a couple of things. I suspect some of you out there are interested in becoming incremental developers. And that is very good, because as we've said before, we need 1,000 small developers to rebuild this company, to rebuild the middle class, you know, to empower our neighborhoods. I mean, the only way that we're going to take back our communities from the big gentrifiers is to gentrify, using gentrification instead of gentrification, our neighborhoods. And gentrification is this. That's when the locals own the property and they get the wealth. And something that's been absent from our cities for many years is those middle class and those lower middle class people able to acquire real estate and build up their communities. And that's one thing that inspired me in the beginning to start, to help start this organization. Now, the one thing that the biggest problem I see people making all over the country, and I talk to people every day, is this. They try to start too big. And Gracen, pull up the little Merrill house, if you don't mind here. So this is in the Merrill house. And in the beginning, what you should do is, Bernice has said, buy a building or buy a little house and refix it up. And I don't care if you rent it for a while or there's one right there. That's a little house, an 800 square foot house. I don't care if you rent it, you know, and make some money off of it, or like me, I had to build these up and sell them so I could get more money to do the next project. And the thing is see, I've been doing this work for over 30 years now in the same place. All the things you've already heard, I'm doing those things. And you need experience. See, this is not a business that's a cookie cutter business that you can get like a franchise. See, there's not a really good manual you can get. We have to teach you how to think. We have to teach you how to critically think. And the only way you're going to learn to do that is with deals. And so these days I do about 150 transactions a year. That's leases and renewals and new projects and things like that. And so you have to do those deals, and you can't do a deal if it takes you 3 years to get one put together. So the next thing I want to say is that in doing this as a business, most of the people that you're going to run into, and some of the people, and most of the people I know, are only doing this part-time. And to do this as a business, see, it's not like the old organizational charts where you have the developer up here and you have some vice presidents and some managers. See, that's the way big developers are. And none of the people there really know all the parts. See, as a small developer, you got to know everything. So you're like in the middle of the wheel that Gracen put up in the very beginning of this talk. You're in the middle of the wheel and everything goes through you. And so you have to figure out what things you can do in this process to make money. And to me, it's a minimum that you got to do this. As the developer, as a small developer, you've got to become your own general contractor. You've also got to become your own leasing agent or your own sales agent. And you also have to become your own property manager. So, and you are the developer as that. And so for those things, sometimes, not all the time, you can pay yourself. So you can pay yourself for those fees instead of paying to the outside. So I would tell many people, like some people I'm coaching in Dallas now, get your real estate license. And while you're doing your own leasing, you might lease something for somebody else down the road that helps you make the living to do this. So, and going to the next slide, or the 212 main, if you don't mind, Gracen. So if you can do these little houses like this, then you might step up another step and do a little bitty commercial building. So see this little building, this is a $500,000 building. It's got 2 900 square foot retail spaces in the front, built new, and 2 little 400 square foot apartments in the back. Now, if you have a business or you could live in this thing and rent the other 3 units out. So this is a really good way to start if you're going to build in the Dallas, Texas, where I'm from. There's not a lot of old buildings like Bernice has up in Buffalo. So we have to find infilled sites and try to develop them or change them into something else. So when you're doing these, so you start off with a little house, then you move up just a little bit, and then maybe if you're in places like ours, you have a bunch of old rotten strip centers. Show them the DeSoto Marketplace. So this is DeSoto Marketplace. It's an old strip center that had a bad grocery store in it that failed, and then it had a hardware store in it. And instead of putting another 99-cent store in there, what we did was divide it up into small incubator spaces. And so today, we're about 95% people of color in this incubator that starts off as little as $250 a month. And at the same time, I have a shopping center that was completely dead that is now very vibrant. So see, you can step up over time. You don't always have to stay cottage forever. But I will tell you this, I know a lot of people that just do cottage houses and just do small houses that make a really good living, and they specialize in that. So as you've heard already, we want you to become legendary. And what is legendary? Legendary is this. When somebody says, did you hear about that guy who sells the tacos down in South Dallas? Did you hear about that little developer up in Buffalo? Did you hear about that guy in Atlanta who's not only, planting gardens in his neighborhood, but he's also painting buildings and rebuilding houses? Did you hear about that girl in Canada who's teaching people all over the country how to do this work? That is legendary. And so that's what we want you to become. And to be legendary, you have to be purposeful, and you have to be caring. And by farming, by doing the farms, by committing your life to that farm, I'm not talking about just while it's good. I'm talking about forever. By committing those things, you change the laws of the universe. You change your karma. You create your karma. You make things you become attractive. So you become attractive. If you're attractive because you're doing these boutique, cool, legendary little things, you will never have to worry about raising money again once you get started. So we want to encourage you today, if you haven't, to look at incrementaldevelopment.org to consider becoming a small developer in your community. And I don't care where you are. My dad was a carpenter. My mom was a long distance telephone operator. I was a motocross racer. So anybody can do this. But if you're in the business already, if you're a real estate agent or an architect, an engineer, planners, you're perfect for this business. So get started today. Thank you, Gracen.
Thank you so much, Monte. I'm gonna just pass this back over to Rachel because I know we're probably a little bit over time here. But thank you so much. I just love all of our faculty and alumni. You're amazing, you inspire me. And again, we can put a link and I'll put a link in the chat to a place where you can access our Strong Towns training that we have on offer. So Rachel, I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, thanks so much. And if you want to stop screen share, I think maybe I can get all of our faces on here. But yeah, we just have a few moments for some questions. We got a lot of great ones, and an overarching one that came up, this was submitted by James, he asked, how can these ideas especially apply during this pandemic? And maybe just more broadly, like, how has the pandemic affected any of y'all's businesses, the work that you're doing? Are you pivoting? Yeah, does anyone want to like jump in on that question briefly?
I have thoughts. How are we doing this? Monte probably has a bunch.
Go for it.
So just on the pandemic stuff, so small scale buildings are perfect for pandemics, in my opinion, because when you rent out a space for $600 a month or $525 a month, like a storefront space, you can absorb a couple of months. My nail salon artist or tech, she couldn't open and she was worried. And I said, the last thing I want you to do right now is worry about your rent. And my pie shop, we were going to launch a week before COVID hit. I was like, the last thing I want you to do is worry about your rent, because when you have a 2 or 3 unit building, the rent that's coming in supports the mortgage. And yeah, we could worry about the insurance later. We can worry about the other stuff. It's okay. And so these spaces provide a lot of flexibility, and they're not a $7 million building with like a giant mortgage payment there.
So I would say a couple of things on that too, is I would say this, look, what we do is basic stuff. You know, if you stick with the basics, I like to say the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker. You know, if you stick with the basics of what a community needs, not the Gucci, you know, not the high-end stuff, but we're like building neighborhood quality of life. So you think about your neighborhood, like look around you and figure out what's missing in your neighborhood if another pandemic hit. So think of it like this: if a pandemic hit, another one like this one, if not this one's bad enough, but if it hit and you had to stay within your radius, you know, neighborhood, can you survive? And so we'd look for those kind of things. You might also be thinking about to-go food and things like that. If you're a big fat set down restaurant right now, they're bankrupt here. They're not opening back up. But the little 800 square foot bar that serves sandwiches, they're serving beer on the street and sandwiches out the front door. They survived. They turned into a general store. So you might want to think about what you're doing and how it can work virtually going forward. I would think about this, because I don't think this is the last one that's going to happen.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone. Another question that came in from a couple folks. Someone asked, what's the most important thing that a city can do to help incremental developers? And another person asked, what are zoning code changes, policy changes that you would recommend as a means to remove barriers for incremental developers? Does anyone have a thought on that one?
Yeah, I'm actually going to just recommend, if you go to that link I sent, incrementaldevelopment.org/strongtowns, we're hosting a webinar on exactly this. We call it the Dirty Dozen. There are 12 things that you are going to find immediately in most code across the continent. When we're talking about addition by subtraction, those are like first step things that you can look for in your code to change. So so that's a webinar that we're going to be hosting, and then our executive director Jim Kuman is going to be doing a case study analysis afterwards, talking about some of the work we've done with South Bend, Indiana, who has put in a lot of work to actually revamp their code accordingly. So if you're interested in that, we can go through 12 items, like we're right with you, and talk about next steps you can take on those items. But I'll just refer you to that link that we posted. But I mean, spoiler alert, parking, like get rid of your parking minimums. That's number one.
I think the most important thing that a city can do, or a community to do, but a city or a mayor, a city manager or mayor, look, if you don't have the city manager or the mayor on board on these things, it's going to be hard to ever change policy. But I think one of the most important things that we can do today is to get equity. We need small developers and small businesses and people that are just getting started need two things. They need inexpensive loans and they need cheap equity. In cities, for a fraction of the cost of what we give away today in abatements and taxes and things like that, if cities could provide this for local developers, local small businesses who are going to build a building with 2 apartments in the back, we could solve a ton of problems. And the next thing you need with money and capital, so if I have capital / hope, if I have hope, I won't throw a brick through your window. But if I don't have hope / capital, I'll throw a brick through your window. That's just the way I was when I grew up. So we need capital, equity, and loans, and then we need coaching. And so if it's true that we're only as strong as our weakest link, we need our top people in this country helping in coaching. And so to me, those are more important than everything else in a community that you get. That's how we can empower people.
And I just have one more additional comment to that, because this is literally what I've been doing every day for like the last 4 years. 2 things as a small developer that I tell my mayor of my city is this. 1, bring us to the table. If you just bring us to the table, we're already in the neighborhoods. We'll literally give you the answer. Like they're trying to solve problems, going to conferences to get solutions, and literally the people are already in your city, but they're just not being included. Big developers get brought to the table, and that's why you get big development solutions. If you bring small developers in, they will literally tell you exactly what needs to happen for your city, for your town. Because once again, what's working in Atlanta or in my neighborhood is not what I will tell you is absolutely going to work there. But your small developers locally know exactly how to translate that. And secondarily, to back up Monte's point about funding, if you can just allocate 1/100th of the amount of money that you allocate to big developers to just a small developer fund to either help acquire land or to fund, as he said, with equity, it would eliminate a lot of projects that don't get done. And just as a quick example, I literally sat in the room with one of our local municipalities who said, Joel, we only have $5 million. Like, nothing can be done with $5 million, right? And like, my jaw dropped. I literally told them, if you all had given me $5 million like 2 years ago, like, we would own half of the west side of town because it was so cheap and I knew all of it. And so anyway, that's the other piece, is that the money goes a lot further in the hands of a small developer, and the return on that investment is actually much greater, as has already been proven. So those are my two additions to that question.
Thanks so much, y'all. So we've had some questions in about funding, and I'm guessing Gracen probably also has an awesome workshop that would help you learn more about that too. But maybe just briefly, Bernice, there was a question specifically for you about like, how did you transition to doing this full time? And I'm guessing others are also doing this full time. Like, how do you make an income off of this, especially if you're starting from not a big pot of money in your bank account?
So so I did side hustle for 4 years, like weekends, evenings and weekends for 4 years. I worked as an energy efficiency consultant that worked across the state, you know, doing energy efficiency renovations. So I built my contractor network. That's how I first found my first investor. That's how I knew the developer network. It's how I knew the building department, the inspectors, etc. And then right before I turned 30, I was like, I need to take the leap before I turn 30. So I rented a 455 square foot storefront with like $5,000 in the bank and a credit card. And I took on one client who gave me, let me property manage his buildings. And I said, okay, I'm gonna manage your buildings and deal with all your crap. You're gonna pay me full time, like a salary, right? And so he gave me the storefront, he gave me his buildings. I had read the Property Management for Dummies book the weekend before it. I shit you not, I'm not kidding. And then I opened my office. In fact, I hired somebody on Craigslist the night before. So when you say that like, oh, I can't do this, I don't know everything, in my opinion, ignorance is bliss. I would never do that now, knowing what I know. But at 25, I was like, hell yeah, let's do this. So I would say, like, what would the inner 25-year-old Bernice do? And I think about that all the time, because it was when I took my biggest risks, but also took like the craziest chances, and they worked. And you know, so I think but side hustle could last you a long time. I only have full time because I manage properties and I lease apartments, and or I have a leasing staff, actually. That's the only reason why I'm sitting here talking today.
Thanks so much. Anyone else want to jump in on, like, how do you make this work financially?
A minute ago, we talked about the things you got to do. When you do this work, you either got to pay somebody to do it or you got to do it. So let's say you form a partnership and you have an LLC that's going to own these properties. Then you're going to want to charge the LLC for the work that you do. So the leasing work, like if you lease a space, you get a leasing commission. If you property management, you get a fee for managing it. If you do the development or the construction, you get a fee for doing that. So you're paying yourself if your project has enough money to pay you. And I can say this now and laugh today, but I had a project, I've done everything from hotels to theaters and things like that. I had a hotel project where I got my development fee 10 years after I started, on the day I sold the project. Because I put the deal together and there was not enough fee for me. That's another reason we tell you to start off small, one at a time, so you can learn how to pay yourself along the way. And along the way, so you can, like Bernice said, you can manage property for somebody else that's right in the neighborhood, or you might lease space for another person in the neighborhood, or maybe you do fee development for somebody, or maybe you do add a small porch home. So you do these other things, but they're all in your neighborhood. See, you're doing them all in the neighborhood. You don't have to own everything, being an incremental developer. You
yes,
can help other people.
On that, Monte, just to make it clear, I have a full construction team that literally does construction work for other people. So I have like 5 clients that do incremental development too, but they have me do their incremental development for them. So some projects are things that I own, some things are investor projects that I own with an investor, and then other things are like just clients who like align with my values and understand that community matters, and we work to build their portfolios too. And only then am I able to like make enough money, if that makes sad but true.
Yeah, gotcha. Thanks. We had a couple questions. This will probably be our last one here. A couple questions about like how to deal with kind of negligent landlords that someone mentioned, like they just have a space downtown and they're just like using it as storage, and it's just like a blight on the community, or developers that just come in to make a quick buck and don't really care about the town that they're investing in. Does anyone have advice on like how to respond to that? Besides, I mean, I think the biggest advice is to just like do the good work yourself. But yeah, does anyone have insight on that one?
I mean, I'm always glad if somebody else doesn't want to speak up, I'm glad to do it. But first of all, you know how there's hoarders, you know, on TV, there's building hoarders. And there's people that'll always say, well, I'm not going to give it away. So one of the things that I've been doing is I am partnering with two of those building owners who never want to give it away, right? I am partnering with them. Now that's hard to do. That's a hard nut to crack, but they're building owners. And so the only other thing you can do is pray for death. Okay. Because when their kids get the property, then they're going to, you know, they're going to send, you know, they're going to sell it off then probably at that point. The big developers come into town. If cities will also set aside small lots, you know, a lot of the big developers want to take all the small lots and plat them into a big super block, which really just destroys the character of a neighborhood. If cities will keep their lots small, it will force small development. And it's I think it's one of the best things you can do to keep small, is that just don't allow the developers to come in and destroy the lots. Not only are the buildings historic, but the lots themselves also sometimes are historic, you know, in their shape. And so that's a way you can keep gentrification from coming so harshly at a city.
And what Monte's talking about is something that a lot of people don't realize. You know, it is not practical for a big developer to be doing very small projects like we're talking about. So if you make the default a small project, then it's not going to make sense for them economically to do it. You know, we have the situation we have because we've catered everything towards big. And if you start to cater things towards small and towards local, it is not going to be practical for people to do kind of big, dumb projects. It's just not, it's not going to work for their business model, or they're not going to know how to do it because they're not on the ground and they don't have those relationships. So I think I hope I was getting at what you were talking about, Monte, with like maintain your small lots. Don't let people consolidate it and turn it into a super block.
Yeah, we see quite often, we see these small lots as a negative to the community because people are thinking of small houses as being low income. But in many of the places that I work, the smallest houses are the highest value per square foot in making the cities. If you talk about Joe Minicozzi's, you know, measuring of these cities, you know, they're the highest producers for the city quite often. And today in the tiny home movement, a lot of these tiny cottages just being rebuilt can really fix a city's taxes. You know, you can raise, you know, quickly. And so the small lots and the small houses are extremely valuable, and I would not get rid of them because they're impossible to replace. It's too expensive to build a small lot and put a sewer to it and a water to it and all those things.
Yeah. I just wanted to quickly jump in. I don't have personal experience with this, but in Windsor, we have one neighborhood, and I'm friends with a lot of these people, and they got together and they decided that they wanted to kind of take over this one neighbor. I don't say take over. A lot of them actually live there and have grown up there. And the way that their strategy was to go around to all the building owners who have been around for forever and offer, and they just were really aggressive about it, and they did it with a lot of buildings. And you know, some people do like to building hoard, as Monte pointed out, but when they started to see catalysts and things happening around the neighborhood, they started to say, okay, actually, yeah, you know, we're willing to let this go because we see the neighborhood improving, and we see a restaurant going in, and we see, you know, these different businesses. And so I can't I guess I would like to emphasize the importance of networks and relationships. And like when you have a team of people going at it from different skill sets, sometimes someone else is able to make that case better because they have, you know, they're going to put the restaurant in. And so if you know those people, connect with them and then try to start small with one block. You know, what can you change there? that seemed to kind of work in Windsor. It's slow going, but we're hoping to do a little bit more. So yeah.
Yeah, and just to chime in off that, if you're feeling overwhelmed because there's a lot of buildings in your neighborhood that are vacant, or somebody hoards all these buildings, you might be successful piecing off a building or two from them and building the case to why they should sell more, and bringing up the value and bringing up the neighborhood, or, you know, so I've done that single-handedly with one guy in my neighborhood. And one time it didn't win for me, but I took a guy who hoarded buildings out for soup. He's like 85 years old, and I convinced him to sell. I didn't buy him, but it was soup that got him to say, all right, fine, I'm getting too old. But sometimes you just got to have the conversation and sit down and have the soup. I'm not kidding.
If I could chime in and add one thing. Just regarding, you know, buildings, I like to speak specifically to the challenges that a lot of, you know, people getting into this industry will have, and it's called the F word. It's called financing. And it's, even though it's not, you know, we're talking about, you know, buildings in older areas, older downtowns or forgotten downtowns, at the end of the day, these people aren't giving their buildings away for the most part, unless you're related to them. And then it's typically probably won't happen then either, because they know you. But, you know, how are you even going to approach these people? One tip that allowed us to get the pieces of commercial property that we do own is sending out letters of intent, LOIs. And the thing about it, when you send out an LOI, pro tip, call it a letter of interest versus a letter of intent. Because a lady called me that was really upset because she was like, what do you mean you're intending to buy my building and blah, 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 blah. And I thought it landed much better when I started changing that from that LOI from letter from intent to letter of interest. Then, hey, this is a letter showing that I am interested in purchasing your property. And that kind of, you know, it's just a little, I mean, in the big commercial world of, you know, commercial acquisitions and, you know, $30 million acquisitions and lots and things of that nature. I mean, they're rough and, you know, very, you know, they got spikes, so they speak very directly. Or if you're talking to someone from an incremental development perspective, maybe just say, hey, you know, as my letter of interest in purchasing your building. And then to Bernice's point, yeah, you know, talk to them, because I just sent them out blindly. I did not expect to honestly get anyone to reach back out. And the dude was like, yeah. He was like, I'll do that. I mean, it was a $10,000 down payment, but that put us in a position to actually own and control a building. And, you know, and it's, you know, it's called seller financing. And that's something that people are just like, oh, that never happens in this market. Trust me, it happens in this market. So it was just, you know, that's kind of like how you get started, whether it's some raw land or whether it's an existing structure. Like, yeah, like do that. And again, to Bernice's point, make sure that, you know, that's how you build a trust. And every so often I check in with the owner who's financing it. I was asking, hey, you got anything else to sell? You know, anyone else that has anything to sell? Because right now people are a little bit more cash strapped. And so we're trying to work on our third deal right now where we're going for, you know, seller financing again, right down the street from my first building. So I just wanted to add that because it kind of starts with the acquisition and it starts with money. Either you're going to be getting it from a bank or you're going to be getting it from the seller.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. We have to wrap it up today, but it's been so inspiring and beautiful to hear from all of you. I know I speak for our attendees when I say that, yeah, this has just been such a gift. I've learned a lot. And yeah, there's lots more to learn. We'll send out that link, but again, it's incrementaldevelopment.org/strongtowns. Gracen set up some different links and continuing education opportunities for anyone who is interested. So yeah, thank you again, and appreciate all the work that you're doing. Take care, everybody.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and thank you to all of our panelists and to our listeners.